Hi, everybody. It's Peter Schiff. This is Friday, September 3rd, 2010. Well, we finished out the week with the highly anticipated jobs report that came out, and once again, it's an expectation game. The data is being touted as being good news because it's not as bad as people had forecast. We did lose jobs, but just not as many jobs as people thought. And in fact, the private sector managed to create 67,000 jobs. Unfortunately, they're not the right kind of jobs because we lost 27,000 manufacturing jobs. Goods producing jobs are what we need. We lost those. We gained more service sector jobs, but that's what we don't need. See, the problem is when people are working in the service sector, if they're not producing goods, then when they go to spend their paychecks, they have to buy the goods that are made other places. So we end up having a bigger trade deficit. We're creating consumers, but not producers. And so that's undermining our economy. We need hundreds of thousands of good producing jobs. Unfortunately, because of government stimulus, we're not getting those kind of jobs. We're getting the wrong kinds of jobs. In fact, President Obama, when he gave his speech today, was touting this good news, saying that, we're moving in the right direction. We're just moving there too slowly. Well, he needs a compass. We're moving in the wrong direction. Right? We are exacerbating the problems. It's a good thing that we're moving in the wrong direction slowly. What I'm afraid of is that we're going to pick up the pace, which unfortunately we're probably going to do. We don't need to pick up the pace. We need to change directions. We need to slam on the brakes. The right direction would be to shrink the government so that the economy can actually grow and expand, to repeal all the rules and regulations that are distorting the economy, and to allow a vibrant economy to create the productive jobs that we need. I do think we are having meaningful recoveries all around the world. That's part of the story this week is the very, very strong data that's been coming out all over the world. In fact, a couple of months ago, the idea was that the problems in Greece and in Europe then were going to spill over and derail the U.S. recovery. No one's talking about that anymore. Now the worry is that the U.S. double dip is going to derail the global recovery. And, I don't think that's going to happen. Looking at the railroad analogy and decoupling, I still believe in decoupling. You have to understand what's being decoupled here. The U.S. is the caboose, not the engine. And it can be decoupled. The global economy can expand, despite the fact what happened in 2008. The only thing that happened in 2008, maybe that I didn't anticipate, was that we had a big rally in the dollar. And maybe I overestimated the intelligence of the investment community to understand the crisis. But the problem is the people who didn't foresee the crisis didn't know how to react to it, and they foolishly bought the dollar. But the dollar's rally has ended. It is falling. In fact, this week, the Swiss franc made a new 52-week high. Also, silver made a new 52-week high on the week. The dollar in general was weak. The dollar index closed at 82. Many of the gold stocks made new 52-week highs. Those that didn't are still close to their 52-week highs. And I think gold is so strong, silver is so strong, is because people are figuring out that the stimulus policies, the easy money policies, are undermining the dollar and other fiat currencies. And all of this is very bullish for the alternative, which is gold or silver. I think the data that we're getting now is certainly bearing out the decoupling case. Maybe it's a tough couple of years late, but it's still happening. Anyway, also in response to the data today, President Obama is out there urging Congress to pass his small business stimulus plan, which has some targeted tax cuts for small business, which, I'm for tax cuts. I just don't want the government targeting them, trying to micromanage them. And of course, I want spending cuts so that we don't have deficits instead of taxes. But part of his plan is to increase the loan guarantees for small business, the size of the loans that the U.S. government will guarantee. Now, I want small businesses borrowing money. I just don't want the government guaranteeing the loans. See, that screws up the free market. You see, I want businesses borrowing money based on their ability to pay it back, because that way the lenders will make sure that only the best projects are financed. The loans that are going to result in profitable businesses that are doing things that we need, that are allocating resources efficiently so that the economy benefits and that the loans are repaid. What happens is when the government guarantees the loan, then it doesn't matter As long as it's got a government guarantee, the lender doesn't care what the business does with the money. And so credit is allocated or misallocated. You see, you don't get any new credit. When the government guarantees small business loans, it doesn't create new credit. It just reallocates the existing credit. So what happens is a business might get a loan that it otherwise wouldn't have received, but now another business doesn't get a loan, is denied a loan that it otherwise would have received because the government simply redirected the credit from one business to another. If the government really wants more credit, the government has to stop borrowing. The government has to cut spending. That will increase the supply of credit and then let it be allocated based on market mechanisms. Didn't we learn a lesson in the real estate collapse? When the government was guaranteeing mortgages, we got all these bad mortgages. You know, of course, another argument out there for the stimulus and to keep borrowing, and I hear this all the time, is that, well, rates are so low that the government should take advantage of it. Let's just borrow all this money because it's cheap. Well, first of all, we got to pay it back, right, with interest. You know, so why borrow it? Now, of course, we like to pretend that we never have to pay it back, of course, because when the bonds mature, we can just find another borrower to sell it to. But, you know, our lenders, like the Chinese, I mean, they think they're going to get paid back. I mean, you think we tell the Chinese we don't have to pay you back? But what we're actually telling them is, hey, don't worry, we got you covered. You see, we're running a gigantic Ponzi scheme. So when you want your money back, we'll find somebody else to lend it to us. Well, you know, if we put it in those terms, I don't think they'd be so eager if they realize that we're nothing but a Bernie Madoff with a printing press. But in addition to having to pay the money back, what about the interest? It's not like this money we're borrowing is being loaned to us with a 30-year maturity. We have to pay it back in 6 months, in 1 year. It's short term. So yes, rates are down now, but what if they're not down next year? What if they're a lot higher? This is the same mentality of the mortgage bubble, the teaser rate. I can handle this mortgage because I got a teaser rate. Well, what happens when the rate matures? Well, who cares about that? Well, that's what we're saying. We're saying let's borrow all this money now because the short-term rates are down. Well, what happens when they go up? And of course, if we're using the money unproductively, if we're just blowing it on consumption, I mean, how are we going to pay it back? I mean, why borrow it? You know, also talking about nonsensical arguments, I read an op-ed, I think it was the New York Times, or no, maybe it was a Bloomberg article. But the guy actually wrote that the chance of a double dip are slim. And here's his reasoning. He said things are so bad that they can't possibly get any worse. I mean, he said that car sales are so low, they can't go any lower. That home sales are so bad, they can go lower. How about if nobody buys a car? I mean, things are so far from being so bad that they can't get any worse. Believe me, they can get a lot worse, and they will get a lot worse. And if that's the rationale for thinking that we're not going to have a double dip, I mean, imagine how much worse things would be when interest rates are higher. Let's imagine that. Imagine how much worse things are going to be when inflation is finally causing prices to rise a lot higher. And of course, even in the jobs data that we had today, unemployment moved up to 9.6. The unofficial rate, which includes the people who are, you know, giving up work or are working part-time who want to be working full-time, that rate rose to 16.7% to 16.5%. And, you know, also another thing I wanted to mention that came up during Obama's speech, not the one from today, but the one on the Iraq war, the ending the war, which I think is great, but unfortunately, apparently, we're still going to have about 50,000 troops there. So it's not going to be that a complete peace dividend here. But he threw out the idea of a new GI Bill, a la World War II. Now, I haven't seen the proposal for this, but this could cost a fortune. Because remember, when the World War II vets came home, I think it was like, I don't know, like $100 a month or something like that is what it cost to go to college. It wasn't a lot of money. Now it costs a fortune. Can you imagine the amount of money we're going to have to waste sending a bunch of GIs to overpriced colleges to get worthless liberal arts degrees? And the reason they're overpriced is because of government guaranteed loans. And of course, we're going to so undermine the economy because of all the wealth we pull out of the economy to finance these degrees that when they finally graduate, there's not going to be any jobs available for them anyway. What we really owe our veterans is a strong and vibrant economy so they can get real jobs, not running up the deficit so they can waste 5 years, studying liberal arts. So anyway, that's it for today. So have a great Labor Day holiday. I will be back again next week. So enjoy the 3-day weekend, everybody. Take care, and thanks for listening.